the room may have, had one or two opportunities to come in contact with WACSI in the past. The West Africa Civil Society Institute was set up by the Open Society Initiative for West Africa about 12 years ago. And our prerogative is quite simple: to strengthen the capacity of civil society, organizations, actors, institutions across West Africa, including Cameroon, Chad, and Mauritanian. And we do this through our what we call three-pronged approaches. One is in capacity development, which includes training sections like this. And the second area is in knowledge management, where we create knowledge for civil society's use and also document the works of civil society, whilst also giving them platform to document what they do themselves and share ideas and exchanges. The third area in which we work is in policy, influencing, and advocacy. Here we look at connecting different civil society actors, both organized and organic, together to engage, and also creating platforms for CSOs to engage between and among themselves, and also to engage with diverse development partners, ranging from governments to international partners, donors, private sectors, NGOs, and so on. And we do a lot in strengthening the capacity of CSOs on how to conduct advocacy, how to design the advocacy strategies, network, and building solidarity on diverse issues that connects us together as civil society. And we do a lot of investment in young people as well. We have a robust internship program which looks at the internship. It looks at leadership institutes for civil society, middle-level civil society actors, and we also have a research fellowship that we run. I think this is WACSI in a nutshell, and I really want to welcome every one of us again, especially the Portuguese-speaking colleagues among us. I know it's been a while, and I'm happy that today is one of those days where we have a very diverse room or group of civil society. At the moment, if my record serves me right, we have about 40 participants for this training, and we have about 15 Anglophones, 14 Francophones, and about 11 Lusophones. So if colleagues are in, I guess we're going to see, or we'll see how multilingual this gathering is. This is why the interpretation information that Shamrit shared is very important. I think it's important that I also connects the importance of this training to the work that we do as WACSI when we talk about human rights, the various institutions and mechanisms that is open to us that we can use to engage as civil society, and the importance of them, not only for a time like this where the world is scrapping for safety, but even the world before COVID and the world after COVID. It's important that we continue to have this kind of conversation, and particularly to strengthen, to talk about the different capacity, resources, and tools that is open to us as civil society actors to ensure the protection of human rights, and also hold our government accountable that they do the right thing where the rights of citizens are concerned. So we have experts in the room that will be taking us through this process. It's going to be a two section kind of training. We are holding the first section today. So without much ado, I want to welcome for opening remarks from the CIVICUS side, Ms. Susan Wyden. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce that correctly. Please just pardon me. She's the head of the Geneva office for CIVICUS. Susan, if you are in the room, please kindly, you have the floor. Or Paul, if you are in the room, I think you can make some comments. I'm trying to see if Susan is in the room, but okay, yeah, she's in the room. Susan, please, you have the floor now for opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm just trying to see if you can put my video on so that others can see me. I think it said the host had stopped the video option. But let me just say, oh, here we go. Here we go. It's much nicer so that you can, there we go. Hello, everybody. I just wanted to share some welcome remarks on behalf of CIVICUS. We are very glad that we could do this training today, and we think this training comes at an extremely important time in our collective history. As we know, the COVID pandemic has exacerbated and accelerated many of the global challenges that we have been facing. These include things like economic inequality, widespread exclusion, global restrictions on democratic freedoms, limited international cooperation, and a global climate challenge. On top of this, we've seen lately with the Black Lives Matter mobilizations that have sort of raised or indicative of the scope of the problem of structural racism, institutionalized racism, and police brutality. It's also highlighting the repression, the violent repression of protest movements, which is not unique to the United States, of course we know, and nor is it not a new issue. The CIVICUS Monitor, which is CIVICUS's flagship research tool, shows that only 3% of the world's population live in countries that fully respect their democratic freedoms. These are our rights as civil society to organize, to speak out, and take action. That means that 97% of the globe's population are unable to fully realize these freedoms. And without these freedoms, we cannot contribute to the future we want, a future of justice and equality for all. We hope that this training provides you with the tools that you need to influence policymakers at both the regional and international level, as well as to build back better in this post-pandemic world. So we wish you all the best, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you for that welcoming remarks. And we completely agree with you that this is quite timely. Paul, are you there? Paul?
He hasn't been able to join yet. So I think
okay. All right. I would also like to, whilst we are waiting for Paul to join, let me also recognize the presence of Osai, Mrs. Osai Ojigo, who would be, giving us some of the nuggets that we need to uphold human rights rights across the continent. I mean, Osai is a lawyer and a gender equality advocate and human rights expert. She is currently the country director of Amnesty International in Nigeria. And before she joined AI, she served in various roles with Oxfam, including as the interim Pan-African director of Oxfam GB Pan-African program. She was the coordinator, the coalition coordinator for the SOTU, which is the States of the Union Coalition, a human rights observers to the African Union nation to Mali and the Sahel, and the Deputy Executive Director of Alliances for Africa. She is also a consulting editor with the Open Global Rights and a mentor to Mandela Washington Fellows. Osai is Nigerian, and she holds a law degree from the University of Lagos, Nigeria, and a master in law degree from University of Wolverhampton in the UK. Osai, if you are in the room, you can just say a few words to welcome us or to greet us. Osai, are you in the room?
We are all unmuted.
Osai. Osai, if you are speaking.
Lara, I think Paul has joined. Paul is currently on the floor. So maybe we can receive Paul by the time Osai.
We are all muted. Someone has to unmute us.
Paul,
okay.
Currently you are unmuted.
You are unmuted, Paul.
Okay, thank
because
you.
I can hear you.
Yes, I think Osai was muted. I think so. Yes, thank you very much for everybody for being on this platform, for sparing your time and be with us. Thank you, WACSI, for joining hands with us and bring this to fruition and to have it, you know, it comes at the right time when we are all really need to engage in different platforms, when we really need to have exposure of what is happening. There is a lot of restrictions happening in our countries. And of course, the pandemic has really front-loaded some of those habits that we have always kept under our, you know, coffers and our beds in terms of governance, in terms of human rights, and thus having a meeting of like this really becomes timely, becomes important for all of us in our different contexts. As Omarara said, I'm based in Johannesburg at CIVICUS, and I coordinate the advocacy for African region. And we'll be together taking this journey of sharing and learning from each other around advocacy at African Commission, advocacy at UN, but more so advocacy in our regions and in our respective countries. Thank you.
Okay. Paul, thank you so much. Thanks a lot for those words. Osai, if you're there, would like to see your face and hear your voice as well. Osai.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Osai Ojigo. I'm the Country Director of Amnesty International Nigeria. I'm happy to be joining you today in this workshop. One of the key areas that I'll be helping facilitating on is on the African regional human rights system. As a lawyer by training, this is one area that I have a lot of experience in as a result of my work in the continent, and also playing a key role in the establishment of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, and would really want every person who is participating in this workshop today to be able to maximize the opportunities which exist within the African regional human rights system. I think that we'll talk a lot more during that session. And I just want to thank WACSI and CIVICUS for the opportunity that they have given to me to be a part of this training today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, Osai. I think without much ado, I'm trying to see the number of people we have in the room. Like I said, as at last night, we had 40 participants, richly diverse, from Lusophone speakers to Anglophones and Francophones. So I just want to be sure that we have adequate number of people in the room so that we can go into the real business of the day. Like Susan mentioned, I think having this kind of training at this time, it's really important. Like I tell colleagues that COVID cannot stop the work that we do. Though we are all trying to, you know, get familiar and build expertise around this virtual rooms, because we are all used to, you know, physical meetings and training, but we are getting better at it and quite fast. I think we've been fast learners as in the past 3 months to cope with this new world. So I know the sector is more than ready to move ahead, COVID or no COVID. But some interesting development that we have seen is how COVID as a pandemic itself has further, you know, worsened the status of human rights across the continent, if not across the globe, as the case may be. And one of the things I'm hoping that this section will allow us is to see how we can continue to engage, how we can continue to hold leaders, institutions, accountable even in this very difficult times? What strategies, what tools can we use? How can we do it? This is not because it was something easy for us to do pre-COVID, but now we even have to do more and put all our resources to bear. So I think we're going to start, and if you permit me, I will welcome Paul again. Paul, I didn't read his bio. He has a very long profile. I call him my senior colleague, you know, a senior brother, so to say. He bullies me a lot, but it's fine. This is what seniors do. You know, Paul is currently the Advocacy and Campaign Officer for CIVICUS, is the Africa lead. He has worked with various regional and international organizations, focusing his work on governance, human rights, and development. He's implemented an array of advocacy work at the national, regional, and international human rights mechanism and system. So Paul will be starting the section now, but before then, we have a poll that we're just going to show now, and would like you to take 1-2 minutes to respond to that poll. Colleagues, are we ready with the poll? Just to assess where we are and who is in the room. How much do we know about these human rights issues and mechanism and systems before Paul now starts to introduce us to the United Nations human rights system. We're starting at the global level, and then we'll begin to streamline it to the continent and to the region. So you have the first poll now. All participants, I mean, everyone in the room, let's see how much we know. How would you rate your level of knowledge of United Nations human rights mechanisms? I won't attempt to read the French, even though my French is intermediate, but in the mornings, I don't want to do that. So can you kindly vote now? And the second question says, how would you rate your knowledge of African human rights mechanisms? So the first one is United Nations, which is global, and the second one is talking about the continental mechanism. Let's see how much we know in the room. And the third one says, how confident are you about using the African human rights systems in your work? How confident are you? Is this something you will want to explore, something you will want to engage? Let's also vote now. And the fourth question says, in which city and country is the African Commission on Human and People's Rights located? If you would like to engage the mechanism, number 4 is asking you, in which country is the African Commission on Human and People's Rights located? Let's us all vote now. Let's vote now. We have a few more seconds. We have a few more seconds. Okay. 8 more seconds. If you haven't voted, please go on and do so. This is interesting. It's interesting. So at the moment in the room, with about, how many people do 41? We have 41 people in the room. 60% of the people in the room at the moment says they have good knowledge of the United Nations human rights mechanism. That is interesting. 60% have very good knowledge. Good knowledge, and 8% have very good knowledge, and 8% also have excellent knowledge. Only about 17% says their knowledge of the systems, United Nations HR system, is poor. The poll is still growing. Okay. And then on the second question, which is talking about the knowledge of African human rights mechanism, we have 50% good. 50% of the participants says they have good knowledge. Now it's 53%. No excellence here. I like this honesty. It's important because this is where we're going to be talking a lot more as we begin to exchange our ideas and knowledge. And 33% says fair knowledge of African Union human rights mechanism. Let me go to the third one. The third question is talking about your willingness, to engage or to engage this African human rights systems in your work. And 21% says they are very confident to engage the system. 47 says, well, we are confident we would engage the system. 37 says not very confident, we are not sure we will engage the system. And 5% says no, we are not going to engage the system at all. We are not confident about engaging the system. I hope by the end of this training, when we take another poll, we would have been able to up, our interest and confidence to engage this system. Sometimes you don't want to engage something because you don't know how it works, or because of maybe its bureaucratic nature, or it's difficult and all of that. Let's see how much knowledge we can share with ourselves in the course of this engagement. And the final question says, in which city and country is the African Commission on Human Rights, on Human and People's Rights located? 24% says Arusha, Tanzania. Arusha, Tanzania. And 5% says South Africa, Pretoria, South Africa. 57% says Banjul, the Gambia. Banjul, the Gambia. And 24% says Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. This is interesting. And I love the fact that we put this question, we included the question yesterday. Okay, I think this is the only question that I may have to give the answer, because the others and the learnings that we are going to be sharing with ourselves will kind of help us in that area. So the African Commission on Human and People's Rights is in Banjul, the Gambia. So a round of applause for the 57% who got the question correctly. This is interesting. Let's end the poll now. By the time we are ending the sections, I believe that we will run the poll again, and I'm expecting that some not so good would have moved to good, if not excellent. So please, the manager of the room, can you clear the poll now? Can you clear it off our screen? I'm still seeing it. I'm still seeing the poll. Okay, thank you so much. Paul, you can see what we have in the room right now. So I'm going to hand over the floor to you as you launch us into the world of United Nations human rights systems. Paul, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much. It's interesting. It's interesting to hear what the participants say in terms of your questions. Maybe another question would have been, where is the UN Human Rights Mechanism located, or Human Rights Council located? Would it be that? Would it be Accra? Would it be Lagos? Or yes, but yes, yeah, it is interesting. I remember when I had started my work some time back, I was asked the same question. I used to confuse the Arusha, the Addis Ababa, it's all AU, African. So it's good that it keeps coming, but that explains why we need such sessions, such discussions, so that we are all the same level in terms of understanding what we do and how we do it. I hope I am allowed to share my host disabled participant to share screen. So if I can be allowed, yes. Yeah, I have a lot of materials in terms of our session, but I will just, this is a trigger. This is just to help us, you know, start thinking and reflecting about UN. A lot is there and cannot be covered here. So, and also as Omarara said, we have the second session, which will delve deeper into the UN, specifically Human Rights Council. So here I'm trying to tease around general and broader aspects of UN as we may know it, good enough that around 60 people have some knowledge about UN. So feel free to interact. I will always pause to listen to you. I will always pause to get a question, but also I will be throwing in some of the questions to ensure that we are all getting along. Yeah, so just a minute. Right. Okay. Yeah, so the United Nations, why UN? That's not going into the historical perspectives of the World War I, the World War II, and how it came about. But the issue as the states, the policymakers, and peace-loving people and development-loving people at that time thought that having a United Nations as an institution would help in maintaining peace and security, would enhance friendly relations among the countries, and also achieve international cooperation in solving the problems of the day. And this was far back in 1945. So one can say that by now we are celebrating 75 years of the birth of UN. And all these are included in the Charter of the UN, which we may call the Constitution of the United Nations, as we'll see in the coming slides. So having been established in 1945, as I said, the UN currently has a membership of 193 states. So it cannot be for civil society organizations, but it is for countries. It's for our countries to be members. Then as civil society organizations, as individual actors, we can participate in the operation of UN. Yeah, so as I said, the Charter, the Constitution, which forms or which establishes the United Nations, is a big document, is a deep document. If we can all try to access it, it is available on the internet, readily available, can read through. But the UN is made up of 6, we could call them units. We have the trusteeship, we have the General Assembly, we have the Security Council, Economic Social Council, International Court of Justice, and the Secretariat. Our concern here, or our focus, will be the UN General Assembly. This is where most of our human rights perspectives, our human rights work, most of the human rights systems and mechanisms are located. So note that the others are not important. They are, because symbiotically they work together, and synergistically they combine all their focus and mandates to ensure that a whole system, as enshrined in the Constitution of the UN, is achieved. So the General Assembly, this is, you could say, a meeting of heads of states, which provides a forum for international issues to be discussed. You remember every year around, I think, July, August there, they all meet in New York, and then every president or head of state presents the issues in their countries, discuss critical issues, and then come up with, you know, either resolutions. So this is also the summit or the meeting that is responsible for appointing the head of the UN, as well as other mechanisms. It could be councils, it could be commissions, it could be working groups around issues of concern, but for our sake, around human rights issue. Yeah, under human rights, under General Assembly, then we have the Human Rights Council, which is an intergovernmental body within the UN. Apparently has 47 states. This could increase, but now there are 47 states. They are responsible for promotion and protection of all human rights around the globe. So it has the ability to discuss all thematic human rights issues. And this should be our concern as NGOs, as civil society actors, as human rights defenders. This should be our entry point in terms of promoting and securing rights, our rights on the continent and on the globe. So then the Security Council, of course, primarily this is to look at the issues of security, peace on the continent. It has 5 permanent members, then it co-opts other 10 members who are not permanent. And then it has other groups on peacekeeping, international tribunals that ensure that if we don't borrow examples from far, like in West Africa, we have peacekeeping missions, you know, so we have those tribunals that are working around the peace and security on the continent. So that is the work of the Security Council. Then we have Economic and Social Council. This body coordinates the economic, social, environmental issues, like the climate change will fall here, the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals together with under General Assembly. So it also it holds the meeting annually by the ministerial different ministers from the member states, and then look at issues of cooperation and working together. ECOSOC also has an opening for civil society organizations to register, to be accredited, and then work with directly with UN agencies, but mainly the General Assembly and then the, as I said, the Human Rights Council. So you can be accredited, as we see also with the African Commission, so that you are you have like automatic entry whenever there are summits, there are conferences of UN happening. Then the Secretariat, which is in New York, this is where the family of UN is birthed or is housed. So, and then coordinated by the Secretary General. There is International Court of Justice. Many people confuse it with the ICC, International Criminal Court, but this one works on disputes between states and gives advisory opinions to agencies of the UN. So this is not connected with the ICC. Oops, what's happening?
Paul, do you need something? We can hear you.
You can hear. I'm wondering why it's not moving. Okay.
No, you are not controlling it. We are.
Oh, okay. Okay, then trusteeship.
So you can, sorry, Paul, you can just tell us next, in case
yes,
you are done with the screen.
Okay, next, I thought I was controlling it myself this side. So trusteeship, which is tasked with supervising the administration of trust. And then also it focuses and aims at making sure that everything, the rules, the procedures of UN, are followed based on its charter. Next. Okay, so human rights. If I could ask, how many of us understand what human rights are and what is human rights for your understanding? At this stage, I will need some how do you call it, hands up, then so, you can speak.
Dear colleagues, you can kindly raise your hand to enable our colleague Paul to know who wants to take the floor, please. Thank you.
All right, there.
And then someone can tell us what they understand about human rights.
Yes, Mr. Dennis, you have your hands up. You can unmute yourself and take the floor, please.
Can't hear anybody.
Hello.
Dennis, you can speak, please.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, Dennis, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
All right, good morning and to everyone. Thank you for this platform, and I'm really joyful and glad to be here this morning in Liberia, from Liberia. So when it comes to human rights, what is human right? I think human rights are fundamental right. One is to enjoy in spite of being intimidated or being coerced by any authority, because it is a fundamental right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other person?
I think we have Frederick's hand. Yes. Yes, Frederick, you can unmute yourself, please.
Then why don't we go to the next person, Siddiqui?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Please, can I speak French now? Because my English is not very well. Yes.
French.
Ok, d'accord. Ok, merci beaucoup pour tout le monde. Je suis très content de prendre part au meeting du droit de l'homme et de la sécurité africaine. Mon nom c'est Sidiki Aminata Diakité, je suis de Guinée-Conakry. Donc, comme il a posé la question, il a demandé la définition des human rights. Droit, qu'on appelle ça en français le droit de l'homme. Droits de l'homme, ce sont des droits inhérents à tous les êtres humains, quelle qu'en soit leur race, leur sexe, leur nationalité, leur appartenance ethnique ou politique, ou leur langue, ou leur religion, et tout autre statut. Donc, le droit de l'homme, on comprend ici, le droit de l'homme peut être considéré comme le droit à la vie et à la liberté de tout un chacun, et contre l'esclavage ou contre la torture ou contre la liberté d'opinion ou contre la liberté d'expression de tout un chacun, et contre aussi l'éducation. Donc, c'était aussi ma définition sur les droits de l'homme. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. To the interpreters, we could not hear Frederick in English. I heard him in French. I don't know what happened. So please, can you check that? Paul, you have the floor, or would you want us to take more hands? Hello, Paul.
Okay. Hey, someone had muted me, so sorry. I didn't hear the English one. I mean the previous speaker. So yes, the interpretation. So yes, the human rights. Just if we can go on. These are entitlements. We need to understand from our basics. These are our entitlements. This is what you have as an individual, as a human being. Your entitlements, regardless of where you are based, whether you are in Liberia, whether you are in South Africa, as a human rights, you have your entitlements. Regardless of whether you are a man, a woman, black or white, short, big. So without, like you are less human being, I'm a full human being. So we need to know this from our basics, and they cut across. So if I am here, you are there, we are all equal, and without any, discriminatory consideration. So, and you cannot lose them. My people in Proverbs will say that you lose your rights when you lose your breath, when you die. So that's what it comes to. Although these days, sometimes, especially our political leaders tend to say that human rights are foreign, and this is like a foreign concept. But if you go back to our proverbs and our adages and folks, you will always find it there. So you cannot divide human rights. They are intertwined. They are together. They go together. You cannot say today I'm going to give you housing, I'm going to give you clothes, but I will not give you food. You cannot say that I'm going to give you food, housing, but when it comes to development, there is no development. So we need to know that our human rights are linked, they support each other, and in order to have a full, whole person and human being, we all human rights need to come together and to be worked on together. Sometimes we talk of human rights and we forget that if I need human rights, another person also, if I need my human rights promoted and protected, another person also needs the same. So it comes with obligations. So what is your obligation? What is your responsibility towards protecting and promoting the rights of the other person? So when we say the state has the obligation and duties to respect human rights, what is your obligation? What is your responsibility, you as an individual? So for instance, you need to, if they say there's a constitution, we need to keep peace, we need to keep security. As an individual, what are you doing? As an individual, within your family, within your society, what are you doing to ensure that your rights do not infringe on the rights of the others? Let's say you have the right to ride your bicycle, but it does not mean that you go in, ride your bicycle in public places, and then you step on people because it's your right to ride the bicycle. So when we are talking about human rights, we need to look at ourselves, but we need to look at other human beings to the extent that everyone, all people we are equal, and everyone is equal without any discrimination. Next. Yes, so when we look at the human rights system, it's a cobweb, as I said earlier, it's a cobweb. This is where everything comes in one to one, and then we make it a whole system that can help us. Based on the human rights system, we have what we call the Bill of Human Rights. These are documents around human rights. We have 3 of them with the different protocols, with the different other documents that help us to promote and protect human rights. This is the Declaration on Human Rights, Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights. Next. Yeah, then while states have the responsibility to promote human rights, we need to understand how they do this and how they are supposed to be monitored. So states, of course, will require to bring these documents into their own policies. That's why we have constitutions, and in legal terms now that will be, you know, like to bring them to the national jurisdiction, so that they are in tandem, they are moving along with the UN systems. So the 2 ways of monitoring human rights and implementing human rights is through a treaty-based and charter-based. So there is a treaty and then there is a charter. As we saw up the Declaration on Human Rights is a charter, then covenant is a treaty. So then states will have to implement implement human rights alongside this. But the UN will also monitor the implementation of human rights using the 2 mechanisms. Next. Yes, so the charter-based mechanisms, Human Rights Council, complaint procedures, UPR, and then specialized procedures of Human Rights Council. My colleague next week will come to take us through in details about this with a focus on UPR, Universal Periodic Review. So I won't go much into this, but treaty-based mechanisms, we have human rights committees. Human Rights Committee, we have a committee on economic social rights, committee on racial discrimination. There are around 12. So those are committees. So they form what they call monitoring mechanisms. So a state will have to give a report on, let's say, on issues of women, on elimination of discrimination against women, on issues around the torture. So, and these states have different cycles of reporting. So next. Next, that this explains what we said up. Yes. So the special, we have the special procedures which form the part of the system, and these they include special rapporteurs, independent experts, and special working groups, which all fall under Human Rights Council, and through which the Human Rights Council then gets information from the countries. I've put a link there. When you get these slides, you can share, you can go and look at those mechanisms, how they work, how you can access them. Others have direct interface and lines and offices and institutions with the civil society organizations. And most of these are coordinated under Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, which has an NGO unit that interacts with civil society organizations, that interacts with people in different countries. These are always called the arms and legs of the Human Rights Council, and they help to bring particular human rights and issues of concern to the Human Rights Council. There are very many, we can't delve into them now, but it would be good to go and access some of these online. Next. Yeah, so these are some of them: Human Rights Council Advisory Committee, the expert mechanisms, the social forum, the forum on minority, but these are some of the permanent mechanisms. There are some which are permanent, there are some which are ad hoc. So the permanent are these ones next. Then the ad hoc ones, these are temporal, as the name suggests. They come in as the needs arises. Let's say there is a need for investigations on a particular situation, then they will institute a commission, they will institute a panel, something to do like this. And civil society organizations always assist in some of these mechanisms. So this is where civil society, this is where we need the skill, this is where we need the knowledge to engage with some of these mechanisms. Because if they are, for instance, getting information, let's say, from Benin, these are people most likely who may not be coming from Benin. So they want the context on the ground. So it is CSOs. But if we don't have the experience, if we don't have the exposure and the knowledge, then we may not be able to engage, we may not be able to assist with them. Next. Yes, I think that is that. I had other slides, but for the sake of time, I will share the slides for our own reading, unless there is any question, any clarification. I thought I would save some minutes for my colleague, but I'm available for any comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Paul. If we're to be in the physical room, we have different ways of appreciating presenters. Now I'm thinking my head around what strategy can we use to appreciate you. Okay. So thank you so much, Paul. I mean, this is insightful. I mean, I myself thought, you know, we deal with the UN all the time. We know all these things, but it's interesting to know that there are ad hoc mechanisms and there are ones that are permanent. That's pretty new to me. You know, don't mind me. We learn every day. So I want to open the room now. I'm sure we were taking notes as Paul was speaking. There are things we would like to clarify, or that question you will want to ask, or just want to comment on your experience of maybe engaging the UN system in the past, or what you have learned or something. This is the time to do so. We have about 20 minutes to have this, you know, engagement with Paul. So I will encourage us to raise our hands. If you like to say something, be it questions, comments, or to share an experience of your, you know, previous engagement of the UN system, or even something you have noted within the UN system that you find difficult to understand or to engage with, or whatever it is. So please, I'm looking at the room now. Just raise your hand. I want to believe we all know how to raise our hands. I know this is a new room for all of us, but we are getting better at it. So Shamraid, I know you have this technical eyes for seeing the room well, more than I do. So do we have any hands? Any question, any comment? We have 4 hands. So I'm going to invite Cyril. Just tell us the country you're speaking from or you represent, and then go straight to the question. Cyril, you have the floor. Kindly unmute yourself, and you have 1 minute. Cyril. Cyril.
Oui, bonjour madame, j'irai en français parce que j'ai un anglais approximatif. Ça peut aller?
Please, you can, yes, there's interpretation. Choose what is speaking, whatever language you want. Let's know the country you're speaking from and speak en français, pas de problème. Oui.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est rapidement pour remercier Paul, que j'ai eu l'occasion de rencontrer il n'y a pas très longtemps à Banjul lors de la session de la Commission des droits de l'homme et des peuples. C'est un monsieur vraiment formidable. Je voudrais simplement remarquer que dans la présentation de Paul, quelque chose pourrait passer inaperçu et il faudrait vraiment le préciser. Sa vision, n'est-ce pas, multisectorielle, sa vision vraiment transversale de ce qu'on peut appeler droits de l'homme, vraiment reste très, très intéressant. Parce que ici au Bénin, les difficultés que nous avons sur le terrain, j'allais rappeler que je suis agronome par ailleurs Et vos collègues, avocats, vos collègues juristes disent, mais qu'est-ce que toi, agronome, tu viens chercher sur la question des droits humains et tout ça? Mais je leur dis que lorsque nous défendons, par exemple, le droit à l'alimentation, lorsque nous défendons le droit à un cadre de vie sain, est-ce que ça ne s'appelle pas droit de l'homme? Donc, vos collègues aussi ont cette difficulté-là, ont tendance, n'est-ce pas, à restreindre la question des droits humains aux seuls juristes, aux seuls avocats, aux seules personnes qui ont la capacité, n'est-ce pas, d'avoir une notion juridique. Je dis que même des gens insoupçonnés comme nous autres, agronomes évoluant dans le monde rural, on peut avoir, n'est-ce pas, des aspects très importants sur la question des droits humains à partager. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. Paul, let's just take this round of questions and then you respond, okay?
Yes, yes.
So can I invite Dennis Kuroma? Dennis, you have the floor. Please unmute yourself and you have 1 minute. Let's know where you're speaking from.
Okay, thank you again. Once again, speaking from Liberia, specifically Firestone. I got two concerns. My first question has to do with I'm asking Paul, comparatively, how do you compare human rights situation in Africa and the West? And second to that, looking at 193 member countries of the UN, why is it that only 5 are considered to be permanent members? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, Lara, you are currently muted. Can you please unmute yourself? We can't hear you.
Yeah, no, you're down with Zoom. Guru, please do.
Yes.
Hello, Paul, are you okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes,
now I can hear you, yes.
All right, perfect. Ndiaye, you have the floor. Please unmute yourself and then you have 1 minute. Where are you speaking from? Ndiaye. Please unmute yourself. Okay, perfect. So you can go on. Ndiaye, if you are speaking, I can't hear you or I can't hear the interpretation. Ndiaye, you are not speaking. Your mic is unmuted, but it's not, there's no sign that you're speaking. All right, so I'm going to, Ndiaye, just hold on. Can we have Peel or Peel in Yekan? Peel, your hand is up. Can you unmute yourself and then speak now? Peel.
Hello?
Peel, I can't hear you, but I think you're speaking, but I can't hear you. I'm not getting the interpretation.
Hello, I'm speaking from Liberia.
Peel.
Yes. Hello? Hello?
Yes, Phil, please go.
Peel, are you there?
Hello? Yes, I'm here. Hello? Hello?
Okay, we can't hear Peel. But colleagues, can you hear me? Paul, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, perfect. It means we have an issue with the interpretation there. Peel, if you're still speaking, interpreters, we are not getting it in English. And this is very important. It's question time.
I'm speaking English. Hello?
Go on. We can hear you. Go on.
Okay. So I just have one question to Paul.
Yes,
is there a specific requirement to have African group representatives on a permanent member state?
Sorry, is there specific?
Is there any specific, requirement to have Africa represented on the, permanent member state, the council?
Oh, okay. On UN Security Council. Okay. Okay.
So I'm speaking from Liberia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
any other?
We have Isaac. Isaac Kabul. Please unmute yourself before you speak. I understand.
Yeah.
You know, these things happen. Isaac. Okay, I get. Okay,
Allô.
Isaac is okay. Please speak now.
Okay, merci. Donc, moi, c'est Isaac Kabou. Je suis bon, c'est vrai que je suis sénégalais, mais actuellement, je suis basé au niveau de la Guinée-Bissau. Donc, juste pour dire que je suis très ravi de prendre part à cette formation concernant les droits de l'homme. Et j'ai bien suivi aussi la présentation. Et je voudrais au moins se poser une question. Laquelle? Nous, en tant qu'acteurs de la société civile, qui évoluons dans le domaine des droits de l'homme, ma question est de savoir si, par exemple, moi, en tant que citoyen, je constate qu'il y a un non-respect des droits de l'homme dans un pays donné, est-ce que moi, en tant qu'individu, j'ai le droit de porter plainte directement auprès de la Cour africaine de justice? Par exemple, si par exemple je constate qu'au niveau de l'État de la Guinée-Bissau ne respecte pas les droits de l'homme, est-ce que moi, en tant que personne civile, j'ai le droit d'aller porter plainte directement au sein de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme? Je vous remercie.
Okay, thank you for that question. I'm trying to see other hands. Joseph, can we have Joseph? Joseph, all right, speak now, Joseph.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Paul, for the excellent presentation. My concern has been drawn on the fact that Africa is not represented on the Security Council, but Africa is a non-permanent member of. Yeah. Hello?
Yes. Who is speaking?
Are you getting me?
Yeah,
this is Joseph.
I had invited Joseph to ask his question, but I cannot hear him in case he's speaking.
Yeah, he's speaking. He's speaking.
Yeah, this is Joseph. Okay, I'm from Liberia. Okay. Thank you, Paul, for the presentation.
But I can't.
Are you getting me?
Yes, I hear you. Okay. I hear you, Joseph.
Okay, so my concern has been drawn on the fact that the presentation that was made by you and Africa is not a permanent member of the Security Council, but is a permanent member. How can we reconcile the issue about human rights and African rule on the Security Council?
Do I get your question? He's not a permanent member. How can we reconcile the...
Yeah, in terms of human rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I think there is another end, no name, but it says Zoom. So I'm just going to unmute. I hope I can unmute you. Your logo is H, just H. I can't see your name, but if you know yourself, can you ask your question now? And then we stop this round of question and give Paul the opportunity to respond. Okay, H, please continue.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, please.
Yes, we can hear you.
Merci.
Eu sou o Laudolino Medina, da Guiné-Bissau. Ok. Saudações aos organizadores e a todos os participantes. A minha questão é, tanto, eu gostaria que o facilitador Paulo nos esclarece melhor a relação que existe entre o Tribunal Internacional da Justiça e Tribunal Penal Internacional. Porque sabemos que o primeiro está sob os auspícios das Nações Unidas e o segundo, será que existe a relação entre estas duas instituições? E se existe, qual é a relação? Obrigado.
Yeah, thank you. Someone, I didn't get the English interpretation.
Yes, I didn't get the English interpretation as well. So can we have the interpreter say the question to us?
Yes, yes,
because
yes.
we didn't get it.
That's what I was suggesting. Yes. Yes, time is running. If you can allow me, on the cross-cutting nature of human rights, yes, whether you are an agronomist, whether you are a carpenter, whether you are a teacher, as I said, all of us have human rights, and whatever we do contributes to human rights. Remember what I said, they cannot be delinked. You cannot say, I am a lawyer, so I am the custodian of human rights. Or for you are an agronomist, what do you talk about human rights? No, that is wrong. And unfortunately, that's what we always find back, around in our communities, where most of us do our work. Yeah, but what we need to do is to sensitize the communities, is to know that even a woman who did not go to school, my grandmother, your grandmother, even a girl who has not had education also has the human rights, and whatever she does contributes to human rights promotion and protection. Agronomists, if you don't produce food, we have right to food, a right to life, then of course my life will go if I don't eat. The teacher, if does not go to teach, then the right to education is abused or is violated. So we all contribute to our to human rights, to the well-being. I always use a scenario of, just the basic thing. What do you need in life? What is it that if it is not there, you will die? So the so-called the needs, human needs, and then translate those needs into rights. So you will find that the needs you have as a human being are the same rights that you need in order to exist. When we compare human rights in Africa and then Western world, I think here it's not a matter of comparing, it's a matter of understanding. Different contexts will always require different approaches to some things. So when we say right to education, for instance, the education in the continent, on our continent, may be different from education in the Western world. So what the concept is, we all have the right to education, but the level of education matters. The resources we have to access education will contribute to the promotion and the protection of the right to education. So we cannot compare, we cannot say the human rights, that side is high, ours is low, or the other one is medium, this one is, no, we all have human rights. Human rights are human rights. So then on there are three questions which I think speak to the same, the permanence of members on the Security Council. One thing we need to understand, as I said, that we have a charter, we have a UN constitution. So members sit, vote, and agree. On the permanence, this was created the 5 members were, the slot was created when the UN Charter came into force. So, but then they have rotational, the rotational process where every continent is represented. Yes, Africa is not a permanent member, but there is a rotational process where Africa is always on the Security Council, and currently South Africa is taking
the African slot.
The slot. So where it comes to human rights, still we have the member. The voting processes within the Security Council, the discussion is the same, whether you are permanent or not permanent. The issue is when your year expires, you go, another comes. The other 5 remains, so they don't change. But in terms of voting, in terms of discussing, we will always, Africa will always have a representation at the Security Council. Where human rights issues come in, then they will always be discussed. Then there was a question on an individual complaint to African Court of Justice. I didn't want to go deep into that. I think my colleague Osai will look at that when it comes to regional mechanisms. But yes, there are those mechanisms where civil society organizations, you can take your complaint, you can approach African Commission, African courts, and then you will be heard. Yes, I think just to sum it up, that is that. But it highlights a need for me to maybe delve more into the UN Security Council, which I will send a link on the slides. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks a lot. I think maybe just to corroborate your point a little bit, quite a number of us are familiar with the permanent membership of the Security Council, the big 5s, and there is little knowledge about the rotational one, which I know Nigeria had been held the slot for Africa a couple of times. You know, as a student of peace and conflict studies, we read all these things. So I think more we need to know these things and share the information with colleagues. So I'm seeing Dennis's hand up again. Is it for a new question or you did not put down your hand? We still have a few more minutes to take more questions or comments. So if you have a query to Paul or questions or comments to Paul's presentation, we still have some few minutes to tackle that. So you can raise your hands and we can take you. So Dennis, if this is a new hand, then you have the floor, please.
All right, thank you again. And thanks to Paul for the response to the questions previously asked. But this time around is a brand new one. One, I want to understand how can one obtain, obtain some human rights accreditation. Like for me, I'm an activist when it comes to human rights issue. How can I obtain accreditation to be a part of it? And second to that, why is it that whenever some countries within the UN, like say the B5, whenever they want to wage war on another country, members country do not agree with them, but they can still force their way out. Why is it that it's happening that way? Because UN is one voice and one mind. Why is it that way? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. You can mute your mic now. Ndiaye, your hand is up again. You have the floor. We encourage, okay, before Ndiaye, let me take Gaje Kujovi. Gaje Kujovi, can you unmute your mic and then ask your question? Then after, we'll take him Ndiaye. Gaje, you have on your video instead of unmuting your mic. I know this room can get really confusing.
Someone should unmute him.
Okay, Shamrid, if you can unmute him, that would be great.
Yes.
He has unmuted his camera, like I said yesterday.
Yeah, we made the request, but he has to do it himself. We asked him to unmute.
Oh, he has to do it himself.
Okay,
Yeah.
India. Oh,
I think he's on now.
Gaji, we have you.
And is he talking? Okay. Yes.
Oui, bonjour. Je vous remercie surtout pour la communication. Je voudrais savoir comment est-ce qu'une organisation peut faire pour avoir l'accréditation auprès des institutions des droits de l'homme au niveau africain, notamment au niveau de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme. Donc, c'est ce que je voulais savoir. Et comment faire aussi pour prendre part à des sessions que la Commission organise périodiquement. Moi, je suis Gadier, je suis le directeur d'une jeune structure qui s'appelle ACDF, Action collective pour le développement intégral de l'enfance et de la jeune fille au Togo. Donc, nous travaillons dans le domaine de la promotion des droits des enfants et de la jeune fille. Merci.
Okay. Merci beaucoup, Gadje. Merci. Leanne, sorry, Ndiaye first before Leanne. Ndiaye, you have the floor. Can you unmute yourself? Ndiaye, allez-y. Ndiaye. Okay. Ndiaye, you're not speaking. Okay. Can I invite Leanne?
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning to everyone. I just joined, the discussions, but I have one question that I wanted to put there, hoping that it has not been asked before. Is related to, the mechanisms that we have in terms of sanction. For example, recently we have Benin and Cote d'Ivoire that initiated process to withdraw individual access to African courts. I think they have the right to do that. That is okay. But my concern is, the situation that triggered that. We have, for example, in Benin and Cote d'Ivoire, both countries, individual that took them there to the African court and won the case. Now the country are not taking actions in terms of, the prejudice that they have to settle in terms of what the court has agreed that they have to pay back to these people, these individual people that took them there. But they initiated the process. So how do we make sure that these people get what they are due for? What the country is supposed to give them back.
Okay. Thank you so much, Leanne. That's an interesting question. Okay, we don't have other hands now. Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you. If I can start from the last two, I think if I delve into them, I will be doing a disservice to my colleague, Osai. So who is going to ably manage and handle the African human rights system? So, but just to say that if the decision has come and the country is not implementing its the resolutions, there are other processes, there are steps that one can take in dialoguing, also in approaching them, jurisdiction, things like that. But I don't want to go in. Just shortly now, we'll be entering into that. Accreditation, yes, it is a long process to be accredited within ECOSOC or by ECOSOC, but it is something worth trying. what I can do is, of course, you need to be registered at your country, your country level. You have to be a legal entity with all fulfilling all the mandates, and then you have to be focusing on areas that are not controversial. Of course, you are not linked to how do we call them, like militant groups, the Boko Harams, the Al-Shabaabs of these days. So in short, you have to be within the objectives of UN. Then the paperwork, you have to do everything online. It's free, you don't need to pay. Don't get worried that you will have to look for funding, things like that. But it is a procedure. I will send the link on the site so that you can read through and see. Then you will have people to reference you. For instance, we need an organization like WACSI to give a reference letter, to give things like that. But it's worth trying if you really to engage with these mechanisms. But that should not be a hindrance to engage with UN mechanisms. There are already organizations that are accredited. So in an event you have something, you can approach that organization. Then for instance, CIVICUS, then from there we will invite you, we can give you our card to access those mechanisms on our card, and you will go as a guest of CIVICUS, and you will do what you would have done, because we very much know that it is laborious to get accreditation. The same applies to African Commission, so you will need accreditation. Why go on with the resolution when the country says no? This is the Security Council. Yes, as I said, Security Council issues are based on the votes, are based on consensus within the Security Council. So if the Security Council has said yes, even if the country where the resolution is take place says no, the Security Council will go in. I think that is a lacuna. I think that is a gap within the whole process that maybe need to be revised. But as you know, it has to be revised within the UN systems. For instance, with the Libya, if we can give an example of Libya situation, the Libya was saying no. African Union was saying no. But the Security Council said yes. So there is no mechanism within UN which says that if the country says no, then the Security Council should not go in. So I think that's where we have a gap that needs to be revised. And we always hear that there is a need for review, there is a need for working around some of these resolutions and the charters and the mechanisms to fit the days, to fit the context within our century, within this century. Otherwise, yeah, the Security Council works by itself, not interfered by other opinions or other mechanisms. Otherwise, as AU said no on the Libyan perspective, if it was other whatever, then the Security Council would not have come. Yes, but one-on-one, I see Omarara smiling. Omarara, you can note I have the participants list. I can voucher for that gentleman, and then we talk more one-to-one on how these things sometimes work. Yes, are we done with this session?
Yeah, I know. Just hold on, we have 4 more minutes before the end of this session, and I just got the interpretation for the question that was asked by the Portuguese. So he was asking to know the relationship between the criminal court and the International Penal Court. Do you have an idea?
International Court of Justice. Yes, this, as I said, yes, as I said, the other one looks, the International Court of Justice is between states. You know, Gambia is fighting with Senegal over boundaries in water, that's where we go. It is the state and the state. Then when we go to criminal court, it can look at the issues of an individual, it can look at the issues of a state. It is the Security Council, it is the country, it is the, how do you call it? The criminal court itself to take the cases. So that's where the differences are, yes.
Okay.
I was wondering, Omarara, in all the questions, unless otherwise, I didn't hear a voice of a lady.
That is really, I thought we had one lady.
Unless, yes. So
okay, let me check that.
We should deliberately encourage them to speak up. Yes, in the coming session, so that yeah, we are not seen as, I know we are still in that room where women may come later, but yeah.
I think we are here. We are here. I've taken note of that, definitely. Yes, that must have been an oversight. I'm looking through the list, but we have 10 minutes to do our health break anyways. So thank you so much, Paul, for starting off, for, you know, taking us through an introduction to the United Nations human rights system. It's been an eye-opener for me personally, even though sometimes I call myself an expert. You can see there's always something new to learn. And I believe that every one of us who participated in this section have learned one or two things. We'll be running some polls later. This is the first section of this training, and we will go on a health break now. Like it's been told severally, we should not be sitting for a very long time. So now it's time for you to stretch, what we call energizer in our physical room. So let's walk around our rooms or respective offices. Let's drink some water, some other drinks, and let's use the restroom, and then we'll be back exactly 11:30 will be in another 12 minutes. So we'll be back in 12 minutes. Please, you can leave your screen on, your connection on, or you can reconnect. Please, if there's any questions, just drop it at the comment section. We are going to take it when we come back in 10 minutes time, when we will be having Ms. Osai Ojigo, who is the current director of the country director for Amnesty International Nigeria. We are going to be looking inward now. We'll be talking about African human rights system, which most of the questions you have asked really has to do with. We'll be looking at the relevance of human rights instruments and mechanism in Africa. And then we'll look at the role of civil society, our role in all these human rights institutions and the human rights system. So you have 10 minutes break now, and we expect to see you back by then. And au revoir for now. Oh no, atutalea, that's the word. Atutalea, see you later. In Portuguese, I can't remember. I can't remember what to say in Portuguese, but see you later. See you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Are we here? Welcome
Yes,
back, everyone. Can you hear me? Can we just,
yes, we can.
I don't know, how do we know? Osai, can you hear me? I can see you. Osai, if you can hear me, can you say something? Whilst we give 1 or 2 minutes for colleagues who may have dropped to join us back. Now we have 39, we were 48, so there are about 10 people.
I can hear you clearly.
Okay, Osai can hear me clearly, that's important. So we have just 1 more minute and then we will start the second section. Maybe just as a reminder, don't forget to select your preferred language using the interpretation button. We have interpretation service in English, in French, and in Portuguese. And also, please, when you are taking the floor, if you can just start by saying, letting us know the language you would speak. I think it would help this virtual room to coordinate better. So for example, if I'm taking the floor, I say, my name is Omolara, English, or I start by English, then my name is Omolara, or you start by Français, je m'appelle, or you start by, I don't know what is said in Portuguese, so I'm not going to try, okay? So just start by telling us the language you're going to speak. So English, and then you go on, French, and then you go on. I think it's going to help us to manage the room better from the interpretation side. So it is time for us to talk about the African human rights systems, the relevance of these systems and mechanism, and how you and I can engage these systems. And I have so much trust in my colleague and sister, Osai Ojigo, who is the current country director of Amnesty International Nigeria. This is what I've known her for many years. So Osai, you have the floor now. Let's do it the African way.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Omolara, and thank you all for your engaged participation. I'm going to be mindful of time, and there is also interpretation, so I don't speak too fast. I actually have 2 presentations, but the good thing is that Paul has already set the groundwork for some of the things I'll be talking about. So I will keep that in mind in terms of the proceedings. So I'll do the first presentation, which is the bulk of our conversations today, on an introduction to the African human rights system and mechanisms. And then I will do the second presentation, which is essentially to give you an idea of how to document and monitor human rights violations, which is critical if you want to be engaging with the, whether it's the international or the regional human rights system and mechanisms. So let's get right on with the first presentation. Next slide, please. And thank you, WACSI, for everything looks so nice and pretty. So can we move on to the next slide? So on the next slide, I'm not the one controlling it, so they can move it on smoothly. Slide. What I have, what I had intended to share with you is, you've moved too fast. Can you move to the one before this one? The slide before this one? No? The beginning, the first slide after the introduction. Yes, please. Yes. So I thought it was important to just set the tone. Paul has done a great job, and I want to thank you so much for making my work easier by talking about the United Nations and the international human rights system in brief. So oftentimes, when we think of human rights, it's important for us to know that it's not just something we aspire. And so that's why this quote by Wangari Maathai is one of my favorites. She's late now, but she was a renowned environmental activist and a Nobel Peace Laureate. So she said, human rights are not things that are put on the table for people to enjoy. These are things to fight for and then you protect. So you're on this course today because you don't just want to talk about human rights. You want to ensure that you can protect it and that you secure it so that nobody can take those rights from you or from others. So next slide, please. Next slide, because we've already done the poll earlier today. So I really want us to frame our conversations going forward in terms of key outcomes from this session. After this session, you should be able to know what the African human rights system is and confidently share that to anyone. You should be able to identify the human rights instruments that are available and where you can find them, and how you can use these African human rights instruments. Identify the key African, I think my slides have moved again. Identify the key human rights mechanisms. Identify the key human rights mechanisms and understand their mandates. And finally, you should be able to use and engage the African human rights mechanisms and effectively use the human rights system in your work.
Just 1 minute, the slide will be up very soon. I just need to remove the setting.
Okay, sure. So while they are working on the slides, because I know that time is also critical for us, I could try to just frame what you are going to see in the next minutes. We're going to look at the African Union briefly, and then I'll move us through a conversation around the treaties. These are the laws, the conventions at the level of the continental, which is the African Union, and also at the level of the regional, which is ECOWAS specific, so the Economic Community of West African States. Of course, there are other regions. We're tailoring this, looking at ECOWAS, because most of the participants are from the West African region. Thank you so much for getting the slides up again. So you've already heard a bit about the UN system. I wanted to frame this because even the African human rights system is guided under the political overview of the African regional system. So we're looking at the African Union. This used to be the Organization for African Unity. So one of the things you're going to see throughout my presentation is that the treaties that have existed from the time of the OAU to the present day AU are still relevant today. The way the African Union is organized, it's into 5 regions: East, Central, North, South, West. We are in the West region. Then there are 8 regional economic communities. So I've listed them there, and I'm sure the organizers will make the slides available to you. So within these regional economic communities, you would find that there's the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. And this is the particular rec that we'll be following in more detail when we now look at the regional system. Another thing I should warn you about is that sometimes when we talk about regional within the African Union, it means the 8 regions, the 8 regional economic communities. But we of us, we are used to saying regional, and Africa is a region. Within the African Union, they like to see the region of Africa, the continent, as the continental mechanism. And then the regional mechanisms are these ones which are at the level of the regional economic communities. But don't worry yourself too much about that. We'll be interchanging regional. Just know that as long as it's African, it's on the continent, and it's effective, that is what we'll be using. And just to throw this as a way of information, within the United Nations system and some intergovernmental bodies, they choose to refer to Africa, they divide Africa into 2. There's Sub-Saharan Africa, then there's North Africa, which is usually aligned with the Middle East in terms of groupings. But Africa Union, Africa is 1, and the regions are 5, and all of us are in one continental body. Next, please. So I'm just going to touch on this briefly because Paul has done a good job of explaining what human rights are. And it's really important for us to look at it from the point that there's no discrimination and everybody is entitled to these rights without question. Under international law, human rights is the obligation of states. But you will find that in the African regional human rights system, there's a slight difference. In addition to talking about rights, the regional human rights system also talks about obligations of individuals. And this is what makes it unique when you compare it to the European regional system, the Latin America, the Inter-American regional system, and the international system. Next, please. So when we look at these treaties now, I've just highlighted the most common ones and the ones that naturally we would all see, but there are more than this. So these are not all the international treaties that exist. You'll find that since 1969, we've had a treaty which focuses on refugees. So since 1969, Africa has been dealing with the refugee problem. And so it's not just today. And so don't let anybody make you feel that we're having a problem with refugees and migration because of what is happening with poverty and all the issues in Africa. You'll find that the most critical, Paul had talked about the Bill of Rights with the United Nations. When we look at the African system, for us, the fundamental instrument is the African Charter on the Rights and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And that was enacted in 1981. And then we look now at the Charter, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, then the protocol to the African Charter on the Rights of Women, and then the protocol to the African Charter on the establishment of the African courts. So those are the critical instruments that form the basis of our engagement with the system. I thought it was important to highlight that there are 2 new treaties. These treaties are not yet in force. That means not many countries have ratified them. One is on the rights of older persons, 2016. To date, there are only 2 states that have ratified it, Benin and Lesotho. You need a minimum of 15 ratifications before a treaty becomes effective. Then in 2018, the African Union also adopted a new protocol on the rights of persons with disabilities in Africa. So the human rights framework also at the African level is evolving. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, we've already highlighted some of those rights. I wanted to focus on some of the contents of these rights and then we'll delve into the African Charter. So like I mentioned, we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the African Women's Protocol, and the African Children's Charter. These particular bodies contain the laws. They contain the provisions that you will need in order to show that a human rights violation has occurred. So there's a wide range of them. Because of time, we won't be able to delve into it. I'd rather now move to touch on the African Charter itself so that we can see how some of those rights relate to us in relation to our work. So the African Charter is also known as the Banjul Charter. And it's because it was adopted in Banjul. When you look at it, you would find that these are not all the articles. There are more articles than this, but from Article 1 to Article 26 covers the gamut of rights that exist. Article 1 right down to Article 18 covers the individual rights. Article 19 down to Article 24 covers the people's rights. That is rights that are claimed by communities. So they're not individual rights. Then Article 25 talks about the duty to promote human rights, which essentially also looks at what is it that we can do as citizens of Africa in order to promote and maintain these rights. You all know the common rights, rights to fair trial, right to life, right to work, right to health, right to education, all of that. But what is critical is that at the time in 1981, there was no vision then for a right beyond just the individual. And so for many women's rights activists pushing for the rights of children and minorities, oftentimes look at Article 18 in order to expand the interpretation of the rights that are available to specific groups of people. And it's from Article 18 that we're now able to get the African Charter on the rights of and welfare of the child, the protocol on the rights of women in Africa as well. Next slide, please. So this understanding actually now frames where we need to go to next. Because treaties are important. Can you go back one slide, please? Treaties are important, but for us to be able to touch them, sometimes there are certain things that are called soft law. Like they are meant to make it easier for people to understand, but they are not binding the way treaties are. So I've given some examples of what some of those soft law are. They might come in the form of declarations, of general comments, of policy statements, such as the Solemn Declaration on equality, gender equality in Africa, for example. But general comments is now something that we're seeing the African mechanisms use in order to help us better understand what the treaties mean. So I encourage anyone who wants to engage with the mechanisms that I'll be talking about fully to also look at the general comments to see how these experts have been able to break down these treaties. What does right to life mean in actual fact? If we were to bring a case on this issue, how will we implement it? Next slide, please. So the African human rights mechanisms, and I put a picture of a baobab tree here because I'm sure it's a symbol most people recognize. It's important for us that it's a tree with several branches and that there are many people who would be engaging on it at different levels. So it's possible that some of you would engage with only one mechanism and it's fine. Others may end up engaging with several. And you would also find, as we discussed, that many of them also have overlapping responsibilities. So it's a bit slightly different from the UN in terms of the way the African system has evolved. Understanding each one and how you can engage with it would help. So the first is the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which is based in Banjul. So for those of you who took the poll earlier in the day, you now know where it is. It's based in Banjul, and it's been operational since 1987 when the first commissioners were sworn in and they started sitting to receive cases and to evaluate a lot of the things that goes on there. Then you have the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. They are currently based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. But in the last AU summit, I think not this year, the year before, they made the announcement that it will be headquartered in Lesotho. So very soon the committee will have its own permanent headquarters in Lesotho. Then you have the African Court on Human and People's Rights, which quite a number of you raised during the earlier session. It's based in Arusha, Tanzania. And finally, one of the, we'll look at one of the regional economic courts, which is the ECOWAS Court of Justice, which is based in Abuja, Nigeria, where I am currently located. Next slide, please. So I have we're looking at four mechanisms today. Those four mechanisms can be divided into quasi-judicial and judicial mechanisms. So the first set we're going to look at is quasi-judicial, and this is really important. I know a lot of people have raised this issue. I'm not a lawyer. Can I engage with the human rights system and all of that? You don't need to be a lawyer to engage with human rights. It's just that lawyers are known because they tend to bring matters to court. Within the regional system, this is a bit different. Yes, there are some courts, but there are also some commissions which are not courts. Those commissions are known as quasi-judicial. Quasi-judicial because they do not have the full weight of the law in terms of binding judgments, but they are still influential and they are still critical in terms of the work that they do. So the two that we have is the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So in brief, each of them have 11 commissioners or experts the case of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. They work part-time, so they are not full-time, so they do other things. So anybody on this call can become a commissioner or an expert, if this is your area of expertise. Oftentimes, they are nominated by their state parties whenever there's vacancies, because people are not there forever. They're set there for certain terms of office. What is unique about the quasi-judicial mechanisms is that they receive state reports. This is similar to the UN Universal Periodic Review, for example, which states submit every 3 to 4 years. With the African Union system, it's supposed to be 2 years at the African Commission and 3 years, I think, at the African Committee. I want to check that. But often, the challenge we have is states submitting their reports on time, as well as abiding by the recommendations or the concluding observations which these bodies would have provided. Earlier on, Paul also mentioned the issue about special mechanisms. So both the African Commission and the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child have special rapporteurs. I've highlighted a few of them there, which you could look at to see. So one that is very dear for us as advocates for human rights is the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders. So if you don't know who that is, it's important that you go onto the website of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to find out who that is and how you can begin to engage with them in terms of your experiences in your country, how you are coping, how being a human rights defender is being impacted in line with the laws and the regulations in your country. The African Commission, in addition, has what we call working groups. They are also a special mechanism. This is a group headed by a commissioner, but also supported by experts who can feed in on specific areas. One of the oldest mechanisms we have is the one dealing with death penalty, extrajudicial killing. We have a working group on prevention of torture. We also have a working group on extractive industries. So the Commission is doing as much as possible to ensure that it's engaging with key issues on the continent and can provide specialized information. And NGOs also play a critical role in these bodies, and I'll talk a bit more about that in later slides. So let's move on now to the judicial mechanisms. So for judicial mechanisms, the two that we're looking at are the African Court on Human and People's Rights and the ECOWAS Court of Justice. I should have stressed at the beginning that the only time you can participate in any of these commissions is if your country has ratified the relevant treaty. So for the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, the treaty that set it up is the African Charter. The good news is that all African Union member states, all 54, including South Sudan, have ratified that treaty. So it's a treaty considered universally ratified. But Morocco recently came back to the African Union, and Morocco hasn't ratified. I don't think we have any Moroccan human rights organization on this particular workshop. So all of us here can engage with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. For the African Committee of Experts, to date, there are only 49 countries that have. So before you can decide whether you can use a mechanism, you need to find out if your country has signed up for that particular thing. And that is why we do a lot of ratification calls. So 49 countries only for the African Committee. Now let's look at the judicial mechanisms. For the African courts, currently there are only 30 countries. The good news is that majority of those countries are in West Africa. So that's good. So it's likely that if you have a West African NGO, you're on this call, check the ratification list. Your country has probably ratified the African Court Protocol. For the ECOWAS Court, if you're a West African organization, the 15 member states are all bound to their ECOWAS Court. So you can begin to see now how you can engage. It depends on the availability of that mechanism in your country based on your country ratifying. And if your country has not ratified any of these protocols, it means how can we now begin to mobilize, to advocate for the country to participate. So back to the substance, you would find that for the courts, they make binding decisions. And those binding decisions mean that they have to be implemented by the states themselves. Even for quasi-judicial, there are recommendations and they are persuaded to abide. But with the courts, it's almost certain that they must abide by it. For the African court, even though 30 countries have now ratified, individuals and NGOs cannot approach the court just like that, as some of you might have noted earlier. There's something we call the Article 34.6 Declaration. This is contained in the protocol that establishes the court. That declaration says that a state party at the time of ratifying or thereafter may make a declaration allowing individuals and CSOs to directly access the court. 2 years ago, there were 10 countries that have submitted this declaration. As of today, there are 9 because Rwanda removed its declaration 2 years ago. But this now will soon reduce further because Tanzania has also indicated that they want to withdraw the declaration. Benin Republic has also decided they are going to withdraw the declaration, and Cote d'Ivoire. And Benin and Cote d'Ivoire are both West African countries. And like one of our colleagues hinted earlier, many of them are withdrawing now because there has been decisions given by the African court which the state government are uncomfortable with. This is a cause for concern, and it should be a cause of concern for everyone because we want more people to use these mechanisms. But if our governments are withdrawing and are refusing to ratify, it means that the access we have to these institutions to raise issues of human rights importance in our countries is greatly diminished. If we look at ECOWAS Court of Justice, you'll find that there are only 5 full-time judges. However, the court has been greatly appreciated in West Africa because it's a court of first instance. So for non-lawyer colleagues, what this means is that even if you've not brought the case before in your country, you can go direct to ECOWAS court. Some people find this very challenging within the international law system because the international law system has a system whereby they expect you to have tried to resolve the issue through the court or commission in your country, leading to what we call the principle of exhaustion of local remedies. But with the ECOWAS court, you can just wake up and say, okay, my rights have been violated, I'm going to the court. It doesn't have the limitation that the African court has. And it doesn't also have the limitation that the African Commission has, in the sense that the Commission will ask you when you submit a claim, have you approached the courts in your country and have you exhausted local remedies? That is, have you reached the Supreme Court in your country? There are some exceptions, but generally that's the general principle. So let's move on a bit further now. Yes. Okay. So when we look at the role of NGOs in human rights, like I mentioned earlier, all these mechanisms need to work when people engage with it. So individuals need to engage with it. But we all know that it can be quite problematic. You've already seen that they are all located in several places: Banjul, Addis Ababa, based in Arusha, based in Abuja. How do you then engage with these institutions? So this is where NGOs come in. NGOs come in as individual organizations. They also come in as collectives, as networks, in order to engage with these mechanisms. But the first foremost role that NGOs play is awareness raising and knowledge sharing. Because for people to be able to harness the benefits, they need to understand these mechanisms. And this is one of the things you guys are doing today. Secondly, NGOs are organized in a way that they can raise funds, for example, in order to bring matters before these bodies. I'll give an example. With the African Commission has what we call open sessions and closed sessions twice a year. The open sessions, the African Commission has a session where they call Human Rights State, the State of Human Rights in Africa. During that session, NGOs who have observer status before the African Commission may say a statement, 1 minute, 2 minutes, to talk about an issue they want to bring to the attention of the African Commission. Then there are closed sessions. In closed sessions, that is when the African Commission receives, pays a bit of attention to the communications they receive. Communications are like cases that are filed in court. So this is when the Commission will sit down to determine whether this communication should go further or not. And it is also a session where they will have both the complainant, the NGO supporting the complainant, or if the NGO is a complainant themselves, and the state in order to assess the situation before them. So NGOs play a critical role in supporting complainants, in helping to raise awareness about an issue which is affecting their region or their country.
Okay.
The other, yes?
Sorry. I just want to remind you that we have like, let's say 10, 15 minutes. So I don't know how far you have gone. I know this is going to generate a lot of conversation, questions, yes. And I want us to create adequate time for that. But please go on, just to allow you.
Thank you for that, Omolara. So the next role that NGOs play is advocacy and campaigns. So essentially, this is when, based on whatever the African Commission or the African Committee has made to a country, either in its state reporting or in a particular case, or if there's been a judgment received, is to ensure that that judgment is monitored in its implementation at country level. If you are really interested in engaging with the regional system, one step is to ensure that you can get observer status. And the rules how you can get observer status is available on the respective websites of these institutions. But the observer status from the African Commission is the most versatile. So I will encourage people, organizations who haven't done so, to do so, and thereby being able to then get access to many of the opportunities to take the floor during the open sessions, and also to file complaints and to join other groups in that space. I think the minimum requirement is you must have been in existence for at least 3 years. Then NGOs need to work with national human rights institutions, and they need to find out from their country, whenever their country is due to submit a state report, what does it entail, so that they can be part of the national consultations in country. And coalitions and network building is actually quite key if we want to see greater engagement with the institution, because there's strength in numbers and there's strength in collaboration. Next slide, please. So when we look at national human rights institutions, these are institutions which are set up by state but are supposed to be independent of states. They are bound to the Paris principles, looking at independence and competence, and they form the bridge between NGOs and individuals and the government. Oftentimes, NHRIs have a bit more access than NGOs, and this is because they are kind of affiliated to government. Like NGOs, NHRIs need to apply for consultative status with the African Commission in order for them to gain access to some of the facilities during the open sessions, during the sessions of the African Commission as well. NHRIs can also contribute to the knowledge and also to studies which can better enhance human rights education and awareness in country. Currently, for the African continent, there's a network of African National Human Rights Institution, NANRI, and they do quite a lot of work in terms of ensuring national human rights institutions are talking with one another, are collaborating with NGOs, and are also engaged in that process. So next slide. I know the next slide says questions, but I want to highlight that there are some links that we'll find useful in the next slide. and to see whether it might be more appropriate for me to go to my next presentation now, and then we answer all the questions in one session. Thank you.
Yes, please, Osai. Let's do that. Can we pull up Osai's second presentations, please?
Yes, just 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. So please write your questions, note it down, and I'm going to be relying on Omolara and the interpreters to help in giving people numbers and ensuring we get gender balance. Since I don't know the participants, you know them, so you'll be able to help me in selecting who has questions. And just to say that Omolara knows this. This is a session that should take the whole day, and we're just trying to crash everything in for you all in 1 hour. Okay, I think it's coming up soon. So the next presentation I'm going to be focusing on is just to give you, I'll say, a teaser about why monitoring and documentation matters. So you are a NGO, you are doing great work, and you now want to present your matters before the regional or the international mechanisms. You need to understand that there are some ethics in what you need to do, and you need to build your case. Next slide, please. Good. So we have many reasons why we do this, but I want you to frame it around this issue. You want to find out the truth, and you want the truth to be known. You want immediate assistance. So if something is happening right now, you want it to be dealt with quickly. In that case, maybe you need to approach an urgent appeal request with the African Commission, for example. You want redress and remedies, because whenever there's a wrong, there must be a remedy, compensation, even a public apology. Policy change, whatever decisions you get or recommendations can influence what happens back in the country. Public awareness, people now know these things are happening, they need to stop doing it, and it can change. One very useful tool that has really helped in terms of pushing back death penalty in West Africa is the jurisprudence of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. That has led to policy and legal change in many West African countries. Next slide. So we all know what monitoring is, but you need to understand that it's long-term, so you can't just monitor today and drop it. You need to be able to compare and showcase the analysis over a period of time. But what many of us do is what we call fact-finding. Something has happened, so we go on the field, we go into the community in order to identify and report on that. But if you can, monitoring also has a long-term impact in terms of improving the overall human rights status in our countries and communities. Next slide. So I can't stress this more than enough, but it's important that we work on the principle of ethics. Do no harm. We need you to be safe. We need your participants to be safe. So if getting information is going to put you in danger, please do a risk assessment and minimize it. And sometimes you might have a very strong story, but if the participant whose life would be in danger, you need to balance that by doing some good, you do not actually do harm to the people. Informed consent. You must always ensure that whenever you are interviewing people's experiences, that they are happy for you to use that information and that they know where you're planning to use the information. Confidentiality. You need to assure and protect your sources and that the information that you've given would not lead to breach of that. Agency. Let those that you're engaging with know how they want to participate and how they want their stories to be used. Everybody must abide by voluntary participation, because that's the only way that when we get a decision, we all can collectively own it and use it. Accountability. it is important to already start thinking what is going to happen next. Oftentimes we're interested, or something has happened, we're angry, we're upset. We don't think so much about when I get the judgment, so what? What am I going to do? How do I go back to the community so that they know what I have done, the information they've shared? Finally, gender sensitivity. There's no way we can do this work without being sensitive to people in terms of language and in terms of approach. Next, please. So the research cycle is just to give you some outline in terms of how you go about this. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing research for a book or a PhD, but when you are actually going to present your case, you need to be able to identify the issue, develop how you are going to get that information. So that's your research methodology, how you are going to collect that information. Then you now go on to the field to collect it. After that, the next stage is verification. And then you need to write up your findings and your analysis and the recommendations. Because when you go to these African commissions and the African courts, they have so many things they are dealing with. So you need to be sharp, direct, your objective is very clear. So they know where you're coming from. Otherwise, it will be lost in all the various reports and complaints they get every day. Then public release of findings, advocacy, and campaigning. You need to ask yourself, how am I going to publicize this? How am I going to make sure everyone knows what has happened? Finally, monitoring, evaluation, and impact assessment. How well did you do? And because it's a cycle, it goes on again. You have another one again, you start the cycle again. And each stage goes systematically. You cannot jump one stage to the other, otherwise there'll be a gap in terms of the information that you're presenting, the facts that you're presenting to the relevant body. So next slide. So this is just an example. You can adapt it as you like, but you need to decide early on, do you want to talk about a specific incident or do you want to talk about a pattern of abuse? So some of us might say, oh, a widow was thrown out of her house and she was abused. That is one incident. So I'm going to the African Commission to say, African Commission, tell the Nigerian states to restore our rights under the African Charter. Or you might be going to say, look, there's a problem of torture in my country. We've documented incidents in several communities covering a certain period. And so we think Nigeria needs to take a definite step to addressing the issue of torture based on these findings. And this could be something you engage with in state reports, whereby NGOs engage by giving a shadow report, or which, if you have the resources, able to showcase how this abuse is systematic and requires a systematic response from the government. So that's a decision you make at your organizational level on a case-by-case basis. So the next slides are going to just give you an insight into how you build the case. The formula that we use in Amnesty International, which you will find useful, we call it VVR. Before you decide on any issue, you must recognize that there's a victim, there's a violation, and there's a remedy that you are asking for. If you don't know what the remedy is, it's going to be very difficult for you to help this person. So make sure you are able to articulate that. Then the next thing is to identify best evidence, and I'll show you that in a few. The sources and patterns that you want to use, corroboration, verification, and then your presentation of that case. Next slide, please. So when you want to test the quality of your evidence, it depends on how original it is. And the rule of thumb is that the eyewitness, the person that has experienced it, seen it, felt it, that evidence is very persuasive, is very strong. Because ultimately, it does not matter what you believe, but what matters is what you can prove. So testimonial evidence is number one in terms of its originality. The next is physical evidence. If there are places where these things have happened and you are able to pinpoint it. Documentary evidence is next. Any paper, receipts, policy paper, or document that supports your case. Photo and video evidence, either of the act they happened, or if you were on a field mission, that you can take and say, this is what I found when I went to the community. Personal observations, you as the fact checker, when you were in the space, what did you see? What did you note? Those are very critical. Because we're in a technology world now, satellite imagery is also increasingly being used. And so you need to be able to apply to the relevant agencies to say, I want to know at this particular day, this particular time, whether the satellite picked anything. It's a bit more complicated, but it's also a way through which we can prove our case. Statistics, if you can get it in order to show a pattern of abuse. Expert analysis, what have experts said about my country? What have the special rapporteurs or special mechanisms shared? And finally, media, NGO, and other reports can also help to prove your matter. So in verifying and corroborating information, because of time, I won't go much deep, but I think you need to note 3 things. Whenever you ask a question, always look forward to probing those questions. That's number 1. Number 2, you need to find alternative views. It's very tempting to have a very persuasive story, but you need to check, can I check this story? You need to check out. You can have, and just because you don't find an alternative view does not mean it did not happen. It's just that you cannot prove it. That's the truth. And then the final one is you need to record everything. There's no point talking about all these things and then you've not saved it either in a voice note or in a document or in a video recording or something. You need to keep those records because that's what you're going to present to the mechanisms. Next slide. Yes, so I'll skip this one because this one talks about a question technique. Yes, so for reliance on memory, I want to just stress this a lot because as Africans, we like to talk and we like to express ourselves. But please and please, when you note something, write it down or say it in a recorder or something. Because a lot of us think our memories are sharp and that it works like a recording device. But this lady here, she's a very controversial US psychologist. She says, memory, I can make you think what you think you saw. So you need to make sure you are documenting what it is you've been told. Because you could sleep on it a few days, you might forget a few things, and someone tells you, oh, but are you sure you thought it was red? You might say, oh yes, it was actually red, right? And so this takes me to the last slide on memory. If we can go to the next one. Whereby we all need to recognize we have biases. We have good intentions, but we are biased because we are a product of our environment. So there's memory biases and social biases. We won't go into much details, but one that I would want to stress is that stereotyping. Even as human rights defenders, we put people in labels. So we need to be careful when we go out on the field and we're asking information of people, that we are not allowing our own stereotypes and our own prejudices to come out in our work. And the best way to fight that is to also have somebody else review what you've checked and the questions you are asking and the probing questions that you're going with, so that you are not inadvertently bringing out your own biases in the work. And I know it's very difficult, but we all can do it if we are aware. If we are aware, that we can take the steps necessary in order to reduce the incidents that this would influence our fact-finding missions. So I think I will stop there with this quote that the palest ink is better than the best memory. Write, record, note it down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Osai. Thanks, and thanks again. You know, on your last point, I can see, I can't see my colleague because we are working from different stations. I repeat this all the time. You think your memory is sharp, but it can't be sharper than your pen and paper. Write it down. So thank you for resonating that. Wow. I think I wouldn't want to, can we bring down the presentation so I can see, you know, more of the floor now? It appears differently when presentation is on. So I want us to kind of raise our hands to engage OSI and the presentation. She has taken us through a number of areas. She introduced us to the African human rights system, just like Paul did for the United Nations human rights systems. And she also talked about the relevance of these systems and the mechanism to human rights issues in Africa. And she also talked about how, first, the role that we can play and how we can play those roles in engaging these national human rights institutions on the continent. So I know we all have a lot of questions, especially maybe on how our national human rights commissions do functions and the interconnectedness with the African Human Rights Commissions and so on. So please, I want us to raise our hands. I see a few hands already. I knew this was going to be more engaging. I want to start with a lady. So I see Chinoye, your hand is up. So Chinoye, please, you have the floor. Just unmute yourself and let's have you.
Hello?
Hello, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. And my name is Chineye, so English. My question is I just want to find out about shadow reporting, how it works. You mentioned shadow reporting, so I want to understand more about shadow reporting and how CSOs can submit a shadow report. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Chineye, thank you so much. I have Leand. Leand, your hand is up. Can you unmute yourself and engage OSI? I know what you want to talk about, but please do it yourself. Leand, you have the floor. Unmute yourself, Leand.
Thank you so much. I think I asked a first question earlier, so I believe that she will expatiate on that. But I have two more questions. The next questions to build on the previous one that I asked related to Benin again. And after Benin initiated the process to withdraw from the African court, our highest court, the Constitutional Court, took another decision a few days later to that. They said that, again, Beninese citizens and NGOs cannot take the country or the government to ECOWAS court. So because it was this initiative was part of the additional ECOWAS protocol, Benin did not ratify it. So they just realized that Benin did not ratify it, since 2005 that this protocol came into existence. So based on that, we are no longer allowed. Now, I just want to ask, the presenter, thank you so much for the great presentations. Based on your expertise, what can we do? Because now that we as citizens, they cut all our legs and hands. Or is there any other mechanism for remedial in this kind of situation? And my next question is, for you working for Amnesty International as a big organization working on the field of human rights. If Leand, I see a case in Nigeria and I want to amplify a voice on that case, but I want to collaborate with Amnesty to take that case up, what should I do? I would like to hear from you on that. And the last one, in terms of hierarchy between national, regional, and continental court or human rights mechanisms, which ones supersede others? For example, if Benin Constitutional Court take a decision and ECOWAS Court take another decision, can they bring down the Benin Constitutional Court issues? Like which ones supersede others in terms of hierarchy? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leanne. Thanks a lot. Okay, we have a few more hands. So I see Peel. Peel, let's have Peel. Let's have Peel. Peel, unmute yourself and then you can note your question.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I would like to appreciate the presentation. I'm from Liberia. Two questions. What happens in a case where a state party refuses to abide by the ECOWAS code ruling? Is there a penalty if a country refuses to abide by ECOWAS code rulings? And if yes, what is the specific penalty?
Okay. Is that all? I thought you said 2.
I think that's it. I think
okay.
That's it.
All right, thank you. Can we have Dennis? Dennis Koroma.
Yeah, hello?
Hello?
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam, for the presentation. My day is filled with your knowledge and nice and unique presentation. But I got a few questions to ask. One, are there reasons behind the pulling out of countries from the ICC and out of the African Court? Yes, I want to know. And another one, is there a special right? Are there special rights that are to be violated by citizens before proceeding to the ECOWAS court? I'll rest for now.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. So the last hand we have, before I give the floor to Osai, and possibly when we have time, we'll take another round, will be that of Rachel. Rachel, just permit me. Rachel, you have the floor. I can't see your mic. I can only see the sign of the hand and the camera.
Yeah.
So Raquel, if you're trying to speak or you're already speaking, okay, fine. I see your mic now. So unmute yourself and then you have the floor. Let's know your language. Unmute yourself. You are still muted.
Établir mon son.
D'accord.
Allô?
Oui.
Okay, bonjour. Je suis du Togo, je participe depuis le Togo. Je vais faire ma collaboration en français. Ma question c'est, est-ce que pour saisir la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme, il faut avoir épuisé les recours à l'interne? Et si oui, à quel niveau peut-on estimer avoir épuisé les voies de recours à l'interne pour pouvoir saisir la Cour africaine de la CEDEAO? Merci. Maintenant, je coupe.
Okay. All right, thank you. I think we should let Osai respond now. Please note your hand. I leave your hand there. Chisom and Da Silva. I will come to you, but I don't want Osai to have too many. We don't want to lose any line of question because these are interesting and important questions that borders on how civil society carries out their work in their respective countries. So the feedback is very important. Osai, please, you have the floor. Let's take those questions. Maybe I should add mine, Osai, okay?
Okay.
Mine will ride on the questions of the last speaker. The point is, the context in our country sometimes does not give us the privilege or the opportunity, to exhaust the remedies, as it were, in our respective countries. And this is why, we talked a lot about the environment in which we are working. Environment matters in everything. Where the state is in charge of all the possible remedies that anyone will want to latch on, can we bypass these local remedies and just move on to ECOWAS or the African Union, the African Commission? That's what I wanted to ask. So Osai, you have the floor now.
Okay. Thank you. These questions are professorial questions. Are you sure you don't have experts in the room? Omolara. So very quickly, thank you for your very useful questions. It shows you are paying attention and you're already working in some shape or form on these issues. So let me start with the issue about the shadow report. So every country is supposed to submit reports at different times, either is to the African Committee of Experts or to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. So the first step is to find out if your country is due to submit a report. That's always a good sign. Then is to now lobby within the country, because countries usually don't want to submit without much pressure. The African Commission appeals, so it would be good for NGOs to also appeal. So if a country now decides to submit a report, it will be on the African Commission website. In the past, it used to be a problem. We will not know until we hear from the grapevine. But now, once the African Commission has it, it will be on their site. The next thing is for NGOs to study that report and then see, are there elements that you want to add to? That is one method. And in which case you decide, so the government said this, we disagree, this is why we disagree. Then there's another one which we call the alternative report, which means you don't necessarily need to look at what your country has shared or what the country has shared. You say, look, we want the African Commission to have a true state of what is happening in the country. So you just develop based on the rights. The trick is make sure whatever rights you're talking about, you link it to the African Charter. So if it's on discrimination, you link it back to the relevant article in the African Charter, so that to make it possible for, because the Commission will go charter article by article in order to check. I guess you are Nigerian, so I would say that it's easy for you to go on the website now and check. Nigeria submitted about 2 years ago, so Nigeria is up to date for you to go and look at examples that are already there, and then see how you can begin to build your skills for when next Nigeria would be up again for review. And I think WACSI, you might even have copies of some shadow reports that some NGOs have. If not, we'll try and gather some from different NGOs, but it will be from different countries, which we can share with you to share with the participants.
That would be great.
So I know the Benin question was going to come. So the truth, and I want to link this also to Dennis's question about why African courts, why states pulling out of the African court. To start first with the ICC, because that one is easy. ICC, there was a lot of clamor because many of our countries are parties to the ICC. But it might shock you to know that despite all the noise they were making, only Burundi pulled out. Kenya is still there, South Africa is still there, Gambia is still there. So sometimes it's also the politics, right? So they want international community. Many of our countries sign up to these things because they want the international community to see them as respecting countries. So they've not pulled out of the ICC that is international. So with the African court, what we're seeing now is that for a long time we've pushed for more of them to ratify. But they are saying that, oh, we can control what happens in our continent as much as we like. So it's a lack of political will on one hand, but also we are seeing more draconian, and surprisingly in civilian administration, more draconian leaders who believe they want to have their way and they want to have their say. This is where NGOs and activists need to rise up. Because if they think they can get away with it, it will become like a flu. Everybody catches it. And then this mechanism that we spent a lot of years building and investing, all the money, all the campaigns, will go down the drain. So for me, it means we need to revive how we campaign on these issues and how we make it very uncomfortable for our countries to pull out of these mechanisms. With regards to Benin, it's quite unfortunate because Benin has been very active when it comes to the regional mechanisms. And I believe it's linked to the current leadership in government. So on one hand, with regards to the High Court and the issue of ECOWAS, I'm not aware of the judgment, so it would be good to have the judgment and then to look at their claim to say that they never signed the protocol, because ECOWAS works a bit differently from the other regions. So it's unlikely that Benin did not sign, because usually when a protocol comes into force, they would have all signed it. So it's unlikely that they have not signed it. It's possible that because people don't know, so they claim certain things. And we need to go beyond what is happening in Benin to also get to the ECOWAS Commission to find out from them the true position. So if we get a copy of that judgment, then we can also follow up. We can work with WACSI to follow up with the ECOWAS Commission to give a definite thing. It's possible the High Court is is relying on information that is not linked to the ratification of the protocol to ECOWAS court, because ECOWAS is a bit unique. Once they ratify the protocol, all of them ratify. It's very hard to find that one country did not. So it would be good to see that judgment. What Benin needs to do now is that the judgment of the court has already happened anyway. I'm going to say something that might disappoint people, but it shouldn't disappoint people. International judgments all over the world takes time to implement. That's the truth. We use it as a means to put pressure on government. As long as a judgment is there, it's operating already in the government to prevent them from performing other acts, even though they've not fully implemented it. That is something to note. Secondly, sometimes you need a change in government for decisions that have been made because those decisions don't expire, for them to be implemented. Gambia is a case in point. There were so many judgments against Gambia in the ECOWAS court. There's only a few years now that is being implemented and the government is making amends to it, because they realize that in order for them to be accepted in the new era, they needed to put will to. So let's be mindful of the political aspect also in human rights enforcement for this to work. Then the question about, you asked about AI and Nigeria. There's an Amnesty International section in Benin. So I don't know whether you might know the director Fidel, and it's very good and very active. But if you're talking about human rights in Nigeria, as you can imagine, as an organization, we also get overwhelmed with a lot of issues. We tend to choose very strategic cases for one reason. One, Amnesty International is not here to replace local or national NGOs. We're here to enhance and to support. And sometimes the collaboration is not visible. It does not have to be a joint, okay, Amnesty goes with this group there. Because we want local ownership and we want the government to take it seriously. So any case that Amnesty works in, oftentimes when it involves cases like this, is from behind. We put our strengths more on advocacy and campaigns. And if there's any litigation you're doing, we can come in as an amicus curiae, but we want you, the organization, to own that case, so that the government does not come later and say, oh, it was an international organization. No, it was your people, your organizations registered in your country that are pushing these issues, and you have to listen. But then there are also spaces that we occupy where we can create access. It doesn't necessarily, so if we know that we can speak at the United Nations, for example, on an issue, and you're a group working on that issue, it's possible that Amnesty International or other international groups, even CIVICUS, can facilitate your participation there. But let's keep talking about this. We always find ways through which we can. And for me, it's not about collaborating with one organization. It's about collaborating with a huge number of organizations, because that's our protection. It's a lot harder to dismantle a network than it is to dismantle one organization. Hierarchy is something that people always, because people want to know that who is the boss, who is the big boss, so that we can go and say the big boss has spoken. So with international law, all the regional bodies, international, are considered the same. So if there's a decision from the international body and the African body, they are all considered international judgments. So ECOWAS, African Court, the committee, they are all the same. So the challenge comes when it relates to national courts. Most of us are guided by the constitutions of our countries. Those constitutions says that the constitution is supreme law of the land, and the Supreme Court in most countries is the highest body. But when there are international decisions, it is imperative of the countries to abide by it, because they also belong to an international committee of nations. If there are conflicting decisions, the international decisions have a more persuasive appeal at national level. The major challenge we've had is how the constitutions have been interpreted to view decisions made from an international treaty body. There's been a lot of study in terms of, okay, it needs to be treated like a foreign judgment. So if you've not registered it, it cannot be enforced and other things. But the international standard law is, once we've gotten a decision on an international treaty, the state is bound by it, and it cannot use its own laws to refuse to abide by it. That's what the law of the Vienna Convention says. So, but oftentimes, and this is the truth, many of our judges are ignorant of this. And so they continue to say, oh, our national laws supersede. But it is wrong, because you cannot use your national law to prevent you from abiding by an international standard. If the laws are the same, like if the African Court, for example, has passed judgment on an issue, and in a later case passes judgment on the same issue, it is not left for us to go back to the court and say, oh, you've brought out conflicting judgments, can you rectify it? But at the national level, the state is supposed to abide. But oftentimes we find our court saying, oh no, we are supreme and we have to do this. But you know where we catch them again? When they go back to the UN and they are submitting their reports, we now remind the UN, they remember, oh, we're supposed to collect money from the EU and money from this, behave and adjust themselves again. But keep at it. They will always deny. One day something happens and then they decide to implement the policy. It just means we cannot afford to fall asleep. We have to constantly be alert to that. State parties, I've kind of answered Pearl's question. It does take time, but what works is opportunity. That's why any decisions we take, whether we decide we want to engage with the African Court or ECOWAS Court, we need to look at what is happening in our environment. If this decision comes to light, who are our allies? Who can we help? Oftentimes as Amnesty, we also petition other countries. So we petition the United Kingdom, America, even though America is a bit problematic now, and even other African countries, right? We target who is the current AU chair. Is this person favorable to issues on children? Is this person able to do? So we do what we call a mapping to identify our allies. So even before we get our judgment, which can be in our favor or against our favor, we've already prepared positions whereby we can then tap into our allies to help us. So allies are not just other NGOs, it's other friendly governments that can help to persuade our government to do the right things. So for ECOWAS Court, for you to engage ECOWAS Court, any human rights instrument that your country has ratified, you can plead before the ECOWAS Court. That's the rule. So there's no special body of rights, and that's why there's no ECOWAS Charter of Rights. So you can plead African Charter, you can plead the International Covenants, you can plead the Conventions on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. As long as your country has ratified it, those are the human rights that you can claim before any of the courts. So to exhaust local remedies, what it means is you need to have complaint in your country. Most of us, it means going to a magistrate's court or a high court. For others, it might mean complaining to a commission and then seeing and exhausting any appeals that are possible within that system. And like Omolara said, our countries, you can be in court for 11 years. Still, you have not passed one layer, and there are still several layers. This is where the Commission, the African Commission and the African Court has come out clearly to say that even though the rule says you must exhaust all local remedies, ultimately you must reach the Supreme Court. But if there are things within your context that makes it impossible, so for example, you can show that maybe you're complaining against a commission, you're complaining against a minister, and the minister's brother is the chief judge of the country, and the minister's relative is the police commissioner. So you come to the commission and say, there's no way my case is going to progress because there's issue of corruption or there's issue of bias. The commission will consider that an exception.
I'm sorry to cut in, Osai. I mean, this is interesting and I'm getting lost myself. Our time is almost spent. Yes. I know there's going to be a second session next week. We have 5 hands up. So I'm really caught between having to take these 5 hands for 5 minutes, like one minute per person, and then you can add it to the line of thought you're holding right now. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
All right, thank you. So I want to call Da Silva. Da Silva, please, can you ask your question? You have 1 minute. And I know you'll be speaking Portuguese, so interpreters, get ready. Portuguese, Da Silva, you have the floor very quickly. Da Silva, can you unmute yourself and speak? Or Vanessa Agostinho Da Silva. Interesting name. Da Silva, are you there? Okay, please, you have 1 minute. Da Silva, you have 1 minute. Unmute yourself.
No, Da Silva, tem 1 minuto.
Sim.
Yes.
Yes.
Boa tarde. Sou Vanessa Agostinho da Silva, da Guiné-Bissau. A minha questão é a seguinte: como é que podemos evitar o desrespeito dos direitos humanos por parte das nossas autoridades? Porque sabemos que muitas das vezes eles é que põem em causa esses direitos que consideramos essenciais para as nossas vidas, por exemplo, o direito à vida, à saúde, à escola, etc. E onde é que podemos dar as queixas em caso de haver esses desrespeitos dos direitos humanos por parte das nossas autoridades? Não sei se fazer chegar as questões.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Da Silva. Chisom, you have 1 minute. Chisom, 1 minute. Unmute your mic and speak.
Hello. Good afternoon from this side. My name is Chisom from Nigeria. So I have 1 comment and 1 question. My comment is with regards to the quasi-judicial mechanism.
We can hear her.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Osai, can you hear?
Yes, I
Hello?
can.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so my comment is with regards to the quasi-judicial mechanism.
Chisom, speak louder.
Okay, my comment is with regards to the quasi-judicial mechanism at the African level. I think that sometimes at the session of these international, regional and continental bodies, the African Commission, they give recommendations which countries adopt. But I've noticed that in Nigeria, for instance, we don't have any organization or CSO that is working on keeping track of these adopted recommendations and holding the government accountable to these recommendations. That is one area that is a huge gap from the national level and in our engagement. Then my question is going to take us back to the issue of judgment. I've noticed that some judicial bodies, such as the ECOWAS, sometimes they give judgments against state parties, countries, and at the end of the day, these judgments are not enforced and they are not implemented by the state parties. I have 1 case at hand, which is the case of Dorothy Njamanze on the Federal Republic of Nigeria. To date, that judgment was obtained about two years ago. To date, Dorothy is still going about seeking for enforcement of the judgment. So my question is this: when this happens, is there any sanction, against the state parties? What type of sanctions are available, and how effective are these sanctions? And the second question is this: is there anything is there a role for NGOs to play to ensure that government judgment creditors, reap the fruit of their judgments, to assist in judgment?
Okay. I like that, Chisom. Thank you so much. Mute your mic. Adama, you have the floor. 1 minute. Please unmute yourself. Adama, you have the floor. Unmute yourself if you are speaking. Adama Dembele. Okay.
Hello.
Yes,
English,
hi,
please.
Adama. How are you?
I'm good, and you? My name is Adama. I'm from Mali, currently calling from Johannesburg. Thank you for this opportunity, and I would like to ask 2 questions with regarding the non-judicial mechanism. First of all, how useful is the parallel report of the civil society organization if the government or the state does not submit its own report? My second question is related to the challenges government faces because of this multiple report to submit to different committees and mechanisms. I remember last year, Amnesty issued this report on the state of African regional human rights mechanism, and it puts a very sad and ridiculous picture of how level African countries are not submitting their reports to the different mechanisms. So my question now is, and one of the reasons invoked was, it is so much that they don't have enough personnel to deliver. Okay. My question now is there any discussion to make the task easier, both for the states and the civil society, to unify these different mechanisms in submitting report? Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Adama. I think we have to be careful with time now. So before I take the other 2 comments, colleagues, I want you to send the link to the survey, the post section survey today. I want you to put it on the comment section so that participants can click and begin to answer those questions in a survey. It's a very short survey. Please do that quickly. Then let me invite Lindo Nhaga. Lindo Nhaga, you have the floor 1 minute. I want us to take all these questions and then we're done and Osai can round up. Lindo, you have the floor. 1 minute. Perfect.
Ok, muito obrigado. Eu sou Lindo Nhaga da Guiné-Bissau. A minha preocupação tem a ver com o seguinte: falou-se aqui muito das decisões proferidas pelos tribunais regionais. E a minha preocupação é igual à da senhora Chisholm. Relaciona-se com a capacidade de execução daquelas sentenças por parte da própria comunidade. Porque quando o tribunal comunitário emitir uma sentença relativamente...
We are not getting the English interpretation. Osai, can you get it?
No.
So English is speaking Portuguese. Can we have it in English, please? My channel is on. Yes. Yes. Okay. So Lindo, in Portuguese, speak.
Ok, tá bom. Como eu estava a dizer, a minha preocupação relaciona-se com a capacidade de execução daquelas sentenças por parte dos tribunais regionais. Por exemplo, os tribunais comunitários. Quando emitem uma sentença e estas sentenças não são cumpridas pelos Estados partes, quais são os mecanismos que as comunidades criam para a efetivação destas decisões? Porque se não houverem os mecanismos para a execução destas sentenças, para mim, eu acho que não faz sentido os tribunais comunitários estarem a emitir sentenças que depois não serão executadas. Para mim, não adianta criarmos estes tribunais aqui e que as suas sentenças não são executadas. E uma outra coisa, o que é que nós, enquanto ONGs, podemos fazer em conjunto para criar as condições ou mecanismos para execução ou acompanhamento destas sentenças proferidas por parte destes tribunais? Obrigado.
All right. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I will have to take one last person who hasn't spoken. This is Tanzigora. Tanzigora, you are the last person to ask question. And the other one, we are going to take it to the next section. Tanzigora, 1 minute. Tanzigora. Al-Ajay Tanzigora. Can you unmute yourself? Tanzigora, please unmute yourself. I'm sorry, any other answer?
Está ligado, muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado pela oportunidade. Eu quero falar um pouco sobre o sistema dos dois comitês que foram falado aqui. Como sabemos, os dois comitês, os membros dos comitês são eleitos pelos Estados. Esta é uma discussão já a eleição dos membros do comitê pelos Estados. Qual transparência?
We can't hear again.
Ok, alô? Ok. Estava dizendo dos dois comitês, os comitês das Nações Unidas e o Comitê Africano dos Direitos Humanos. Os membros dos dois comitês são eleitos pelos Estados. Portanto, qual transparência ou seriedade pode haver no tratamento dos casos dos Estados-membros, sobretudo no processo de examinação dos relatórios dos Estados-membros? Esta é a primeira questão. A segunda questão, qual a responsabilidade por ter os Estados, de acordo com as cartas dos dois comitês, sobre os Estados que não enviam os relatórios a tempo sobre a implementação dos mesmos? Obrigado.
All right, thank you so much, Osai. I want us to run this up in less than 5 minutes. I mean, we have another session next week, so some of the questions and the same participants will be there. So we'll have more room to start our recap by taking this section. So I just want you to kind of give your closing words for like 3 minutes. You've noted the question. We have room to take it next week. And participants, you know that this training is splitted into 2 sections. This is the first one. By next week, 25, the same time, we'll have to come here together to complete this section and the other 2 sections we are having on what's it called now? Civil society engagement with United Nations mechanism. We're going to be talking about how to network across our countries, the different advocacy and lobbying strategies that we can use. All of this will be taken next week, and it is your participation in next week's section that will confirm whether you are qualified for the certificate or not. So Osai, you have the floor now.
Thank you. So let me start with the comment about enforcement, because it covers most of what you guys have raised. So like I said earlier, enforcement is a challenge with international mechanisms as well, but it requires continued push and mobilization by civil society. With regards to the Dorothy Demanze case you mentioned of ECOWAS, which was given in 2017, interestingly, I was the one that brought that case to the ECOWAS court, and we worked, then I was working with Alliances for Africa, we worked with IHRDA and other groups to bring that case forward. The issue is also about getting the government to implement. But it will interest you to know that there was a case involving Adija Tumani against Mali, where Mali has since paid. And there are several other cases where the courts, where the implementation has already occurred. But it's a continuous process. We continue to demand, and I know eventually they will be able to fulfill that obligation. With regards to state reporting, I do agree with you absolutely, Adama, that it can be overwhelming. But the issues around coordination, a couple of years ago, the African Union, the Department for Political Affairs, attempted to try and map up what are the various reporting mechanisms, even down to APRM, to see how countries can better use reports they are giving to other mechanisms and then streamline it, use that same report and streamline it to meet their requirements for the other committees, commissions, both at UN level and AU level. It's shocking that at country level, coordination is still very weak, and that is where the challenge lies. But I know that the Department for Political Affairs and I know the Office of the Legal Counsel did start that process. So we need our countries to also coordinate. We already know, even in our countries, the interministerial committees are not working as efficiently as they should. Each country should nominate who is responsible. and see how they feed into these mechanisms when the reporting schedules are up, because reporting is one way through which, even for government, they can use to showcase what they've done well and what they can do differently. Because of time, I would just want to round up with one issue, which is the question that Alhaji has shared, which is the committee, the choice of who belongs to these courts and commissions. It is our countries that nominate. For a long time, the African Union has been pushing for countries to involve civil society, NGOs in this process. As you can imagine, it's not happening fully. So what the African Union started doing a few years ago was to say the government has to show how they've consulted with NGOs in arriving at these numbers. And they've even started implementing what they call the African Union gender policy criteria. So if you submit nominations, if it doesn't meet certain criteria, it will not be presented before the heads of states and government. But the challenge is that this information is not circulating around, and we're not really engaging with the AU because we do not know when they hold their sessions. We do not know where to send emails and all of that. Because if you alert, based on this practice they started a few years ago, we can have a better control in terms of the personalities that our countries are nominating to sit on these committees, commissions, and courts. I think it's an opportunity for us to revive this continental work, which many of us have been involved in early years, in order to tap into the best out of the African human rights system and prevent it from going this downward trend we're seeing now, whereby state governments feel they are more powerful than their people, and they are pushing back on these human rights mechanisms. And thank you all for your very useful comments and questions, and really looking forward to engaging further with you. Merci beaucoup, obrigado, shukran, asante sana. Lara, you're mute.
I'm sorry. Sometimes you sit in your little corners and then you think you know. Osai, no, we need to revive our friendship. Please, no. I can't have you as a friend and I don't know this much, okay? Thank you so much for the insightful presentation and the way you have engaged with all the questions. Definitely would have about 30 minutes next week to finish this business. So, and I'm happy you're going to be with us. Guys, it's been 3 good hours of engagement. I know when we talk about the issue of human rights, and every civil society has something to say. So I'm not surprised at the passion and the interest we have received. I can imagine if we had opened this training to the region, perhaps we'll be like 200 on this platform now, and it's going to be so, you know, I don't know what to say. So again, thank you, Osai, for this presentation. Thanks to Paul. Paul, you have to say something. Maybe I will let you close this meeting. But colleagues, next week at 10, we're going to be back here. The room will be opened like 30 minutes before time so that we can at least meet ourselves physically. I think we'll create around 15 minutes to put all videos on, and then we know who is Adama, though I know quite a number of people here. And then before we go into this mode of presentation, Paul, everybody is going to be here next week as well. Yours truly, I will also be facilitating the section on how civil society can navigate through these troubled waters using different advocacy strategies and networking. So I will be on the floor on the hot seat next week as well. So colleagues, this is part 1. Remember, the part 2 will determine your qualifications for the certificate. So please, it's not over. I'll see you next week. I'm going to invite Paul to close this meeting from the CIVICUS side. From WACSI, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Obrigado. Paul, I can't hear you if you are speaking. You are on mute. Paul? Okay, I think Paul is not, maybe some technical issue.
Hello?
Paul,
yes, it's Mark.
Excellent. Please close the meeting.
They have just unmuted me.
I'm sorry.
All along I have been trying to click. You cannot unmute yourself. Yes, for the first time I'm controlled. You know, I always control the Zoom, but now I'm controlled. I see what happens when I control others.
Exactly.
Yes, thank you very much, Omarara. Osai, thank you very much. I feel the same for you, Omarara, for having Osai as your colleague, and you don't know as much as she knows. I thought having sat with some people in class, I would at least be knowing what, but I think they were doing a lot of researches as we were, you know, doing other things. Thank you very much for that expertise. I'm happy that we can tap on your experience from the region. Our participants, thank you very much. I've learned a lot from Benin. I think that we need to focus much on some of these contexts to ensure that we bring out the best out of the situations. Other participants from other countries, please would encourage you to share more experiences from the countries, because they help us to come up with vivid and concrete examples to understand our context. But more so, thank you for putting aside your time. We will be having more engagements, not only on webinar, face-to-face. I'm sure this pandemic is ending soon. I'm a believer, so than later. So we'll have to make sure that what we've shared, which is just an iceberg, we can put it into like 4 days of interface. Then we understand more, we gain more. Until next week, please away from an email for any other conversation, for understanding on what we've shared today. Before we come next week, I can be contacted and we can chat. From CIVICUS, thank you very much, Omarara and the team. Appreciation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. Our participants, please click the link that is dropped in the chat section and answer those 5 questions for us. It will enable us to, you know, make this better the next time. Let's hear from you what you think and what you think we can improve upon. Thank you. God bless you and see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you to the interpreters as well. A fantastic job. Thank you to the team. Thanks. Bye.
Oui. Oh, tu es en train de t'approcher. Je suis ici. OK. Je suis en train